I stood in the doorway of our bedroom, the evening light casting a warm glow around the room. My gaze fell on Helen as she rummaged through her jewelry box, and my breath caught in my throat. She pulled out a stunning necklace, glimmering with diamonds that caught the light in a way that made it almost ethereal. It was the kind of piece that turned heads and made a statement, and for a moment, I felt a flicker of pride. "Wow, that's beautiful," I said, a genuine smile spreading across my face. "Did you get that from one of those high-end boutiques? It looks so expensive." Helen paused, a mischievous glint in her eyes. "Oh, this? I got it at a stock market. You wouldn't believe how cheap it was." The words hung in the air, their implications settling heavily in my gut. "A stock market? Really?" I couldn't hide the skepticism in my voice. It didn't feel right, didn't add up. My mind raced with questions, but I pushed them aside. After all, who was I to question her choices? Helen flashed me a bright smile, clearly pleased with my compliment, and continued to adorn herself with more jewels. As she layered on rings and bracelets, I couldn't shake the nagging doubt that something was off. I watched her, my heart a mix of admiration and unease. "Are you ready for the party?" she asked, glancing at her watch. "We need to leave in a few minutes." "Yeah, just give me a second," I replied, trying to appear nonchalant as I adjusted my tie. The corporate event was an annual affair, and while I enjoyed seeing Helen shine in her element, I wasn't particularly excited about mingling with her colleagues. She looked stunning, yet my eyes couldn't help but linger on the expensive jewelry that draped around her neck and wrists. I tried to rationalize it. Maybe she had found a great deal, or perhaps I was just being overly suspicious. But something deep down told me there was more to the story. The night wore on, and as we arrived at the venue, the vibrant atmosphere buzzed with anticipation. Helen's laughter echoed as she greeted her coworkers, her confidence glowing brighter than the diamonds around her neck. I couldn't shake the feeling that those jewels weren't just a bargain found in a stock market. I watched as she mingled, and the flicker of unease morphed into a simmering concern. Little did I know, this was just the beginning of a journey that would unravel everything I thought I knew about her, and us. The corporate party was in full swing, a sea of laughter and clinking glasses enveloping the spacious banquet hall. Bright lights twinkled above, and the air was filled with a mix of excitement and the scent of gourmet food. I had reluctantly agreed to join Helen that evening, but as I scanned the room, I felt out of place among the polished professionals. Helen looked radiant, her hair cascading in soft waves, and the sparkling jewelry I had seen earlier seemed to glow with an almost hypnotic allure. I couldn't help but notice how her confidence radiated, drawing the attention of everyone around her. My heart swelled with pride, even as a flicker of unease brushed against my mind. I grabbed a drink from a passing waiter and made my way to the edge of the room, keeping an eye on Helen. As she mingled with her colleagues, I spotted her boss, a tall, charismatic man named Robert, making his way toward her. I tried to shake off the knot forming in my stomach as I watched their interaction unfold. "Wow, Helen, you look stunning tonight," Robert said, his voice smooth and inviting. "Thank you, Robert," Helen replied, her smile widening. I felt a pang of jealousy at how easily her laughter danced around him. "You know how to wear those pieces. That necklace, in particular, suits you perfectly. I'm glad you liked the gifts," he continued, leaning in closer as if sharing a secret. My heart dropped as I stood frozen behind a decorative pillar, a chill creeping down my spine. Gifts? He was talking about the jewelry she claimed she bought on a stock market. My mind raced as I pieced it together. "Oh, it was so generous of you," Helen said, her tone warm and flirtatious. "I appreciate it more than you know. You deserve it, Helen. You've worked so hard." "Just a small token of my appreciation," he replied, his voice dropping slightly, making the moment feel even more intimate. I clenched my glass tightly, the ice rattling against the sides as I fought to suppress the anger rising within me. My stomach churned at the realization that she hadn't just found those pieces on a whim. They were gifts from her boss. Gifts that carried a weight far heavier than mere trinkets. As I stood there, eavesdropping on their conversation, a whirlwind of emotions surged through me: betrayal, confusion, and a profound sense of loss. How could she accept gifts from him, knowing how they would be perceived? My heart raced, pounding in my ears as I struggled to process the revelation. I took a step back, needing to distance myself from the scene unfolding before me. Suddenly, everything felt different. The laughter around me faded into a distant hum, and I was left alone with the stark reality that my marriage was built on a foundation I had never truly understood. The rest of the evening passed in a blur. I forced myself to smile and engage with our friends, all the while feeling the weight of the truth pressing down on me. I could no longer ignore the signs. Something was very wrong. I needed to uncover the truth behind Helen and Robert, and fast. Before the pieces of my life slipped away completely. The party pulsed with energy, laughter, and conversation swirling around me like a whirlwind. I watched as Helen moved gracefully through the crowd, her every interaction infused with a charisma that drew people in. I wanted to feel happy for her, to relish in her success, but instead, I felt a tightening grip around my chest, a heavy weight that made it hard to breathe. As she shared jokes and laughter with her colleagues, I couldn't help but fixate on the way her eyes sparkled when she spoke to Robert. Her boss. It was a sparkle I had seen many times before, but tonight it felt different, tainted by my growing suspicion. I tried to dismiss the feeling, but it nagged at me like a persistent itch. Something was brewing beneath the surface, and I could feel it in my bones. What was happening between them? I recalled the way Robert had complimented her, how his gaze lingered just a moment too long, and I felt a surge of anger mixed with a profound sense of betrayal. She had said the necklace was a bargain. Yet here she was, draped in gifts from the man who held power over her career. My mind raced with possibilities. Had they crossed a line? Did she see him as more than just a boss? I grabbed another drink, the cold glass biting into my palm, but it did little to cool the fire raging within me. My thoughts spiraled, each one darker than the last. I wanted to trust her, I wanted to believe that there was nothing inappropriate between them. But the evidence was stacking up, and I couldn't ignore it any longer. With every laugh she shared with Robert, my heart felt like it was being squeezed tighter, the pain becoming almost unbearable. It wasn't just jealousy, it was the realization that I might be losing her to someone else. The thought made me sick to my stomach. I wandered over to the bar, trying to blend into the background while still keeping a close eye on Helen. She was talking animatedly with her coworkers, her voice ringing clear above the chatter, and I felt a flicker of pride again. She was incredible. Talented and beautiful. But that same pride twisted into something darker as I imagined the possibility of her giving her heart to someone else. My hands trembled slightly as I set my glass down. I took a deep breath, forcing myself to remain calm. I needed to gather my thoughts, to confront the mounting anxiety that threatened to consume me. As I stood there, watching her from a distance, I vowed to uncover the truth, to dig deeper into what lay beneath the surface of her shimmering facade. No matter what it took, I needed to know if my fears were justified or if I was just letting my imagination run wild. But the more I watched her, the more it felt like the world around me faded away, leaving only the growing chasm of doubt between us. The night stretched on, and with each passing moment, the grip of jealousy and betrayal only tightened, pulling me deeper into a spiral I couldn't escape. The next morning, I awoke with a knot in my stomach that hadn't loosened since the party. I had barely slept, my mind racing with thoughts of Helen and Robert. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off, and I needed answers. I felt a surge of determination. If I was going to confront my fears, I needed solid proof. After breakfast, I found myself sitting at my desk, the glow of my computer screen illuminating my face in the dim light of the room. I opened up Helen's social media profiles, scrolling through her posts and interactions like a detective hunting for clues. At first, it felt harmless, almost like I was indulging in a guilty pleasure, checking out her recent photos, and reading the light-hearted comments from friends. But soon, the thrill turned into something more serious. I navigated to her connections, searching for any hint of her relationship with Robert. I discovered a few posts tagged with the company name, pictures of team outings, and the obligatory holiday parties where Helen looked radiant beside her colleagues. But it was the comments that caught my attention. "Great teamwork, Helen. You always know how to rally the troops," and "so proud to have you on our team." They all seemed harmless, but they also felt superficial, like a veil hiding something deeper. I scrolled down until I found a picture of her and Robert, arms thrown around each other, wide smiles on their faces. It was from a charity event months ago, and while it seemed innocent enough, the closeness of their bodies made my skin crawl. I zoomed in on their expressions, searching for any hint of a deeper connection. Was there chemistry there, or was I just projecting my insecurities? I needed to know more. I opened a new tab and searched for Robert's name. A LinkedIn profile popped up, detailing his career trajectory. He was impressive, smart, ambitious, with a glowing reputation. There was even a feature article about him in a business magazine, discussing his leadership style and innovative approaches. But instead of admiration, I felt anger bubbling beneath the surface. With each click, my resolve grew stronger. I started to reach out to mutual acquaintances, casually asking about Robert and his relationship with Helen. "Oh, they get along great," one friend replied, oblivious to the storm brewing inside me. "He values her contributions. She's his right hand." The words stung like a slap. Right hand? I mumbled under my breath. Was that all she was to him? The more I learned, the more my paranoia deepened. It was a precarious game I was playing, treading the line between concern and jealousy. But I couldn't stop myself. I continued to dig deeper, scrolling through comment threads and old posts, desperately searching for something that would either ease my mind or confirm my worst fears. Each new piece of information was a brick added to the wall of suspicion, isolating me further from the woman I loved. As the hours slipped away, I found myself in a whirlwind of emotions, each revelation only fueling my anxiety. I felt like a detective trapped in a mystery I didn't want to solve. Yet I was compelled to uncover the truth. I knew I needed to confront Helen eventually, but how could I do that without solid proof? With a heavy heart and a mind full of questions, I closed my laptop, knowing that the shadows were deepening. I needed to act, to discover whether the whispers of my doubts had any truth behind them, or if I was simply losing myself in a spiral of jealousy. But as I sat in silence, I could feel the weight of uncertainty pressing down, reminding me that the journey to the truth would be anything but easy. I needed an outlet, someone to share the whirlwind of thoughts swirling in my head. That's when I decided to call my best friend, Mike. He had always been my sounding board, the guy who could bring clarity to chaos. As I paced around my apartment, waiting for him to answer, I felt a strange mix of relief and dread. "Hey, man, what's up?" Mike's cheerful voice broke through the static of my anxiety. "Mike, I need to talk," I said, my voice low. "It's about Helen. What's going on? You sound tense." I took a deep breath, steeling myself. I recounted the events of the past few days, her expensive jewelry, the way Robert had complimented her, and my suspicions about their relationship. As I spoke, I could hear the disbelief in my voice, yet the emotions were raw and real. "Dude, that sounds shady as hell," Mike said. "Have you talked to her about it?" I shook my head, even though he couldn't see me. "No, I don't want to jump to conclusions. I need proof first." "Proof? So what's your plan? Just sit back and wait?" I didn't have an answer. But then Mike's tone shifted, a hint of mischief creeping into his voice. "What if you turned the tables on her? What if you used what you know to get back at Robert? If he's crossing boundaries, maybe it's time for you to fight back." His words hung in the air, the idea taking root in my mind. I felt a spark of energy ignite within me, a desire to take action rather than remain a passive observer of my own life. "What do you mean? Think about it. You've got insight into her company. If you could leak some damaging information or create a distraction, it could rattle their whole operation. Maybe you could even expose their little affair." The suggestion rolled around in my head like a thundercloud. It was reckless, dangerous even, but I could feel the allure of revenge pulling me in. "You think that would work? Why not? If she's not going to be honest with you, why should you hold back? Sometimes, the best defense is a good offense. Just don't get caught." A mix of excitement and apprehension coursed through me. I could feel the adrenaline surging, igniting a dark part of my mind that relished the thought of revenge. "I could look into their projects, see if they have any vulnerabilities," I said, my voice gaining momentum. "If I could plant a seed of doubt, maybe it could lead to real consequences for her and Robert." "Exactly. Just be smart about it. You've always been good with details. If you know something they don't, use it to your advantage." As our conversation continued, I outlined my plan to Mike, the gears in my mind clicking into place. I'd gather intel about Helen's firm, find out about upcoming projects, and any vulnerabilities I could exploit. I could reach out to contacts I had within the industry, maybe even competitors. The thought of watching Helen's world come crashing down fueled a sense of power within me that I hadn't felt in ages. When I finally hung up, I felt a mixture of exhilaration and dread. This was a dangerous game I was stepping into, and I knew there were no guarantees. But the idea of taking control, of crafting a fate of my design, felt intoxicating. I stood at the crossroads of right and wrong, knowing that once I stepped onto this path, there would be no turning back. I had made my choice, and I was ready to do whatever it took to unearth the truth and reclaim my life. As I looked out the window, the city stretched before me, an endless expanse of possibilities, and I could feel the thrill of the chase calling me forward. The city was drenched in twilight as I made my way to the upscale cafe where I had arranged to meet with a couple of competitors from Helen's firm. My heart raced as I entered, the buzz of conversation and clinking dishes surrounding me like a cocoon. I scanned the room until I spotted them at a corner table, two sharp-dressed men with calculating smiles. "David, glad you could make it." One of them, Kyle, greeted me, extending a hand. The other, Jason, nodded in acknowledgement, his expression more serious. They were eager to hear what I had to offer, and I couldn't help but feel a rush of adrenaline. This was it, the moment I would take control of my situation. After we settled into our seats and ordered drinks, I leaned in, lowering my voice. "I appreciate you guys meeting me on such short notice. I have some information that could be beneficial for you." "Go on," Kyle urged, his eyes narrowing with interest. I hesitated for a moment, weighing the consequences of what I was about to do. But the image of Helen laughing with Robert flashed in my mind, and I felt the resolve solidify within me. "I've been doing some digging into Helen's department. They're working on a new project that's supposed to launch next quarter, but there are some vulnerabilities I think you could exploit." Jason raised an eyebrow, intrigued. "What kind of vulnerabilities?" I leaned closer, lowering my voice even further. "Their market research has been lacking, and they're depending on outdated strategies. I have access to some of their internal documents that outline their weaknesses. If you can leverage this information, you could significantly undermine their efforts." Kyle exchanged a glance with Jason, a smirk creeping onto his face. "That's pretty valuable, David. You're sure this information is solid?" I nodded, adrenaline pumping through my veins. "I wouldn't be here if it wasn't. I can send you the details and the documents later." "What's in it for you?" Jason asked, his expression turning serious again. "We're not exactly in the business of charity." The question hung in the air, and I felt the weight of my decision pressing down on me. "I want to see Helen's team falter. I want to disrupt their progress. She's been keeping secrets from me, and I think this could teach her a lesson." Kyle's smile widened as he leaned back, clearly amused by my motive. "You've got some fire in you, David. I like that. If we can pull this off, it could shake things up in the industry. We could make a serious push for that market share." Jason nodded, his expression thoughtful. "We'll need to strategize carefully. If we do this right, it'll send a clear message, not just to Helen but to the entire company." A dark thrill ran through me as we discussed potential strategies, the gravity of my actions overshadowed by the adrenaline of the moment. I was stepping into dangerous territory, but the sense of control felt empowering. I would take charge of my fate, and if that meant leveraging insider information to disrupt Helen's world, then so be it. As we concluded our meeting and exchanged contact information, I felt a strange sense of satisfaction wash over me. I had crossed a line, but I justified it as a necessary step. I was no longer a passive participant in my own life, I was taking action, and that made all the difference. As I left the cafe and stepped into the bustling streets, the city lights twinkled around me, a reflection of the chaos and excitement within. I was diving into uncharted waters, ready to unleash a storm that would shake Helen's world, and I couldn't wait to see the fallout. The sun rose the next morning, casting a cold light over the city, but I was on fire with determination. After I met with Kyle and Jason, I knew I needed to accelerate my plans. It was time to dig deeper into Helen's world, and I had just the right connections to make it happen. Using my network, I reached out to an old college buddy, Tom, who had landed a job at Helen's firm about a year ago. We hadn't spoken in a while, but I remembered he was eager to climb the corporate ladder. If I could leverage our past friendship, I might gain access to the insights I needed. I shot him a quick message. And to my surprise, he responded almost immediately. "David, long time no see. What's up?" "Hey, Tom, just wanted to catch up. Heard you're doing well. We should grab a drink sometime. I'd love to hear about your projects." It didn't take long for Tom to suggest a meet-up. We arranged to meet at a bar downtown, and I felt a mix of excitement and nerves as I prepared for our conversation. That evening, I walked into the bar and spotted Tom seated at a high table, a beer already in front of him. He looked the same, easygoing smile and tousled hair. After a few pleasantries, I steered the conversation toward work. So, what's it like working under Helen? I've heard she's got a great team, I said, casually taking a sip of my drink. Yeah, it's pretty good, he replied, leaning back in his chair. Helen is a fantastic leader, but the pressure can be intense. We're gearing up for a big launch, and she's been pushing everyone hard. Interesting. What's the project about? I probed, feigning interest while mentally cataloging his responses. Tom hesitated for a moment. You know, I can't get into the specifics. Corporate confidentiality and all that. Of course, I understand, I said, waving him off. But you and I go way back, right? Anything you can share would be helpful. He seemed to consider this, and after a moment, he leaned in slightly. Well, let's just say we're trying to break into a new market. It's competitive, and a lot is riding on it. If we can pull it off, it could put us on the map. A rush of excitement coursed through me. This was the vulnerability I had been searching for. Sounds like a big deal. If you ever need extra hands or some fresh ideas, you know I'm always here to help out, I said, injecting my tone with sincerity. Tom smiled, but I could see the caution in his eyes. Thanks, man. I appreciate that. I'll keep you in mind. After a couple more drinks, the conversation began to flow more freely. As we reminisced about old times, I subtly maneuvered the discussion back to work. Have you had any challenges in your projects? Sometimes it helps to vent a little, I said, offering him an opening. Well, he began hesitantly, there's been some talk about our market research not being up to par. Helen's been trying to streamline things, but I think there's still a lot of room for improvement. This was the golden nugget I had been waiting for. Really? What kind of improvements are they looking for? Tom paused, glancing around the bar. You didn't hear it from me, okay? But I've heard whispers about their strategies being outdated, especially compared to what competitors are doing. With each word he spoke, I felt the walls of Helen's world slowly crumbling around me. Interesting. It sounds like you guys could use a fresh perspective. I know a thing or two about market strategies, I said, trying to sound as casual as possible. Tom nodded, still guarded but warming up. Yeah, maybe. If you ever want to brainstorm, I'm down. By the end of the night, I had gathered enough intel to formulate a clearer picture of Helen's project. I left the bar feeling victorious, the pieces falling into place. I had managed to infiltrate her circle, and with each conversation, I was getting closer to uncovering her plans and weaknesses. As I stepped out into the cool night air, a sense of purpose washed over me. I was no longer just a spectator, I was becoming an active player in a game that had the potential to upend everything. The thrill of the hunt coursed through me, and I knew I was ready to go deeper, into the heart of the fortress Helen had built around her professional life. The air buzzed with anticipation as I received a message from Kyle. We're in. We used the info you provided, and things are starting to shake up on their end. Keep your phone close. I couldn't help but grin as I read the text. My plan was in motion, and the thrill of watching it unfold filled me with a dark excitement. I spent the next few days on edge, waiting for the fallout from my decisions. It wasn't long before the first signs of trouble appeared. Helen called me one afternoon, her voice strained and tight. David, have you seen the latest reports? We're not meeting our projections for the new market strategy, and I'm getting some pushback from upper management. I feigned concern, my heart racing with a mixture of guilt and satisfaction. No, I hadn't seen the reports. What do you think is causing the issue? It's hard to pinpoint, she admitted, frustration evident in her tone. There's been a lot of confusion about our approach. I thought we were on the right track, but it seems our competitors have caught wind of our plans, and they're moving faster than we anticipated. A wave of satisfaction washed over me as I heard the anxiety in her voice. It was working, the competitors were capitalizing on the weaknesses I had exposed. I'm sure you'll figure it out, I said, trying to sound supportive. You always do. Thanks, David. I hope so. I just need to rally the team and get back on track before this spirals out of control, she replied, her voice faltering slightly. After hanging up, I felt the weight of my actions sink in. I had pulled the trigger on a chain of events that could dismantle everything she had worked for. My phone buzzed again, this time with a message from Jason. We hit them hard with a counter-campaign, and it's already creating a buzz. Expect more issues to come their way. I sat back in my chair, a dark satisfaction coursing through me. I couldn't ignore the pang of guilt that accompanied it, but the feelings were overshadowed by the rush of adrenaline. I was in control now, and it felt exhilarating. As the days passed, I noticed Helen becoming increasingly frazzled. She began to work late into the night, her phone glued to her ear as she dealt with the mounting pressure from her superiors. I watched her from a distance, torn between empathy and the need to see her face the consequences of her actions. Finally, the day arrived when the first significant crisis struck. I was at home, scrolling through social media, when I came across an article detailing the setbacks Helen's firm was experiencing. Insider Insights: How Company Name Faces Major Challenges Amidst Rising Competition. I felt a surge of satisfaction as I read through the article, the words confirming what I had set into motion. Helen's team was struggling to adapt to the competitive landscape, and their internal processes were under fire. They had missed deadlines, and their confidence in their project was waning. As I sat there, a cocktail of emotions swirled inside me: triumph, guilt, and an unsettling sense of power. I had wanted to hurt her, to make her feel the weight of her choices, but now I was witnessing the fallout firsthand. Later that evening, Helen called me again. Her voice was strained, and I could hear the exhaustion in her tone. "David, can we talk? Things are spiraling out of control, and I need someone to lean on." Of course, Helen. I'm here for you," I replied, the words tasting bitter on my tongue. As we spoke, she shared her frustrations and fears about the project. I offered vague reassurance, but inside, I was battling a whirlwind of emotions. I could have told her the truth, but the part of me that craved justice and retribution kept my lips sealed. "Thanks for listening," she said at the end of the call, her voice barely above a whisper. "I just don't know how to fix this. I feel like I'm letting everyone down." A part of me wanted to reach through the phone and tell her that I understood her struggles. But I had chosen this path for a reason, and turning back now felt impossible. I was locked into a game that demanded my full commitment. As I ended the call, I felt the weight of my decisions pressing down on me. The first strike had landed, but the battle was far from over. I was caught in a whirlwind of deception and revenge, and as I prepared for the next round, I knew there was no turning back. The stakes were high, and I was determined to see it through to the end. The atmosphere in the office had changed dramatically. What was once a vibrant space filled with creativity and collaboration now felt heavy, burdened by the weight of unspoken fears. I could sense the tension hanging in the air, thick enough to cut with a knife. Helen had been visibly stressed, her usually bright smile replaced by a furrowed brow. Each morning, she arrived earlier than usual and stayed late, poring over reports and trying to figure out what had gone wrong. I watched from a distance, a part of me enjoying the turmoil I had helped create, but another part, a more compassionate side, began to feel uneasy. The latest project, meant to be a breakthrough for Helen's team, was stumbling. Meetings were fraught with anxiety as her team struggled to address mounting concerns. I could see Helen trying to rally her troops, but the enthusiasm had been sucked out of the room, replaced by whispers of discontent. One afternoon, as I sat in a nearby cafe, I overheard a conversation between two of her team members. I heard their missing deadlines left and right. "It's like someone is actively trying to sabotage us," one of them said, their voice low and conspiratorial. "Yeah, it's strange. It's almost like we're being watched. I just can't shake this feeling that someone knows our every move," the other replied, glancing around as if expecting someone to eavesdrop. A chill ran down my spine. I hadn't anticipated Helen connecting the dots so quickly. The fear that she might uncover my involvement tightened its grip on my heart. I had crossed a line, and now the repercussions were beginning to spiral out of control. Later that week, I found myself at a bar with Mike, sharing a drink but keeping my thoughts to myself. I could see the concern etched on his face as he noticed my distracted demeanor. "David, you've been off lately. What's going on?" he asked, concern lacing his tone. I sighed, swirling the amber liquid in my glass. "Things are getting messy with Helen. I thought I was going to show her a lesson, but now it feels like it's gone too far." "Wait, what do you mean? You think she's onto you?" I nodded, taking a sip of my drink. "I overheard some of her team talking about sabotage. They're starting to suspect that someone is deliberately undermining their work. If Helen figures out it's me..." My voice trailed off, the weight of that possibility suffocating. "Maybe it's time to back off a little," Mike suggested, eyeing me cautiously. "You wanted to teach her a lesson, not ruin her career. But she's the one who lied to me. She had an affair with Robert." This is about more than just a job for me, I snapped, feeling a wave of frustration. Look, I get it. But revenge can have unexpected consequences. You need to think about what you want, he urged. I felt my phone buzz in my pocket, pulling me back to reality. I glanced at the screen. It was a message from Kyle. Things are heating up. We need to discuss our next move. Call me. I put the phone down, torn between my desire for vengeance and the sense of impending doom creeping in. My plan was starting to backfire, and I couldn't shake the feeling that I was setting a fire that would consume everything around me. The next morning, I decided to take a walk around the office area. I needed to clear my mind and assess the situation. As I strolled past Helen's firm, I spotted her through the glass windows, deep in conversation with a few of her team members. Her expression was tense, her brow furrowed as she discussed the project that was rapidly slipping through their fingers. Suddenly, I noticed Helen's gaze shift toward the window, and for a moment, our eyes locked. I felt a jolt of panic. Did she see me? Did she know? I quickly looked away, my heart pounding in my chest. I knew I had to act carefully. If she truly began to suspect me, I would lose everything. I couldn't allow my emotions to cloud my judgment. That evening, I received another message from Kyle. We need to accelerate our plan. The sooner we strike, the less time they'll have to react. Are you in? I hesitated. I had been ready to burn bridges, but now, uncertainty loomed over me. If Helen was on to me, what would happen if I pushed things further? As I mulled over my choices, I realized I was trapped in a web of my own making, tangled in a narrative that was quickly spiraling out of control. The thrill of revenge was quickly being overshadowed by fear, and for the first time, I began to question whether I was ready to pay the price for the game I had chosen to play. The days dragged on, filled with a tense atmosphere that suffocated the office. I could feel the weight of my choices bearing down on me as whispers of Helen's troubles began to seep into professional circles. What had started as a personal vendetta was transforming into something much larger. Rumors were swirling, and Helen's credibility was at stake. One afternoon, as I walked past a local cafe, I overheard two women from Helen's industry discussing her latest struggles. Did you hear about the issues at company name? Their new project is in shambles. And some people are saying it's because of a personal scandal involving Helen and her boss, one of them said, her tone laced with intrigue. The words hit me like a punch to the gut. My heart raced as I realized the implications of what they were saying. Somehow, the news of Helen's affair with Robert was leaking into the very circles she had worked so hard to establish. It was as if the walls were closing in on her, and I could only watch from the sidelines. Later that evening, as I walked through the office parking lot, I spotted Helen's car. My heart sank as I felt the familiar mix of anger and guilt. I had been at war with her for weeks now, and yet seeing her car reminded me of the person I once loved. Just then, I heard a voice behind me. David. I turned to see Helen striding toward me, her expression a mix of relief and suspicion. I've been trying to reach you. Can we talk for a minute? I forced a smile, my heart racing. Of course, Helen. What's up? Her eyes searched mine as if trying to read my thoughts. I've been hearing some troubling things. About the project, about me. People are talking, and I don't know how to stop it. It feels like I'm being attacked from all sides. I feigned concern, leaning against my car as I tried to mask the turmoil brewing inside me. That's rough. I'm sure you'll get to the bottom of it. You always do. She narrowed her eyes, crossing her arms defensively. It's more than just rough, David. It feels like someone is deliberately trying to undermine me. I can't shake the feeling that you know something. A rush of adrenaline coursed through me, but I forced myself to remain calm. What do you mean? Why would I know anything? Her gaze intensified, and I could see the gears turning in her mind. I don't know, it just feels like something has changed between us. You've been distant. Are you sure you're not aware of anything happening? I shook my head, keeping my voice steady. I promise you, I'm just as in the dark as you are. You're a great leader, Helen. You'll pull through this. She took a step closer, her voice dropping to a whisper. David, I need to know I can trust you. If you know something, anything at all, please tell me. I'm not trying to be paranoid, but I can't shake the feeling that someone is out to get me. The intensity of her words sent a jolt of conflicting emotions through me. I could feel the urge to confess battling with the desire for vengeance. I don't know anything, I replied, forcing the words past my lips. But if I hear something, you'll be the first to know. For a moment, silence hung between us, thick with unspoken truths. I could see the flicker of doubt in her eyes, and it struck a chord deep within me. Was I willing to watch her fall apart like this? The realization of what I had set in motion began to weigh heavily on my conscience. Helen finally stepped back, her expression clouded with uncertainty. I hope so. I don't want to believe that someone I care about could be involved in this. But something feels off, David. I can't ignore that. Nothing is off, Helen, I insisted, trying to inject firmness into my tone. It's just a rough patch. You'll bounce back, I know it. As she walked away, I felt the distance between us widening. I couldn't deny the nagging thought that perhaps I was pushing things too far. But the thrill of watching her world unravel was intoxicating, and the fear of being discovered only added fuel to my fire. Once she was out of sight, I leaned against my car, letting out a breath I didn't know I was holding. The conversation had stirred something deep within me, a flicker of doubt, a longing for the past. But I quickly extinguished it, reminding myself of the reasons I had embarked on this path in the first place. The game was still afoot, and I couldn't afford to lose. I was in too deep now, entangled in a web of betrayal and revenge. And as much as I wanted to turn back, I knew there was no way out. The stakes had risen higher than I ever imagined, and the final act was yet to come. The days dragged on, and with each passing moment, I could feel the tension building within Helen's office. The pressure was palpable, her team was stumbling from one crisis to another, and whispers of discontent filled the air. It was as if a storm had settled over her department, and the weight of her troubles was becoming unbearable. Helen spent countless hours in meetings, her colleagues exchanging worried glances as they tried to decipher the chaos that had enveloped them. The trust that once flourished in her team began to erode, replaced by uncertainty and suspicion. I had wanted to see her suffer, but watching the fallout unfold in real time stirred something uncomfortable within me. The moment I dreaded arrived during a casual lunch with Mike. We were seated at a small cafe when my phone buzzed with a message from Kyle. I just got intel, they're planning to make cuts soon. Your girl's in trouble. I swallowed hard, the bite of my sandwich suddenly turning to ash in my mouth. What do you mean? Is it serious? Seriously serious. Word is they're not just looking at performance metrics, they're considering restructuring. With everything that's been going on with her department, they might see her as a liability. I nodded, my heart racing. I had engineered this chaos, but now the reality of what it could mean for Helen hit me like a freight train. Could I stand by and watch her career disintegrate? The rest of the lunch passed in a blur. My mind raced as I tried to process the implications of Kyle's message. Helen had always been a force to be reckoned with, but now she was backed into a corner. That evening, I decided to drive past her office on my way home. I wanted to see for myself how she was handling the situation. As I approached, I noticed the lights still on, illuminating the space where she had once thrived. The sight sent a pang of guilt through me, but I pushed it aside. Inside, the scene was chaotic. I watched as Helen paced back and forth in her office, her phone pressed to her ear. Fragments of her conversation drifted through the air, revealing the mounting pressure she was under. I can fix this. I swear, I can turn it around. Just give me a chance, she pleaded, her voice thick with desperation. But the words of her superiors echoed ominously in my mind. They had been losing faith in her abilities, and the pressure had reached a boiling point. I felt a knot of anxiety twist in my stomach as I realized that her career was hanging by a thread. The next day, the inevitable happened. I received a text from Mike. I heard through the grapevine that Helen got called into a meeting with upper management. It can't be good. I braced myself, knowing that her fate was about to be sealed. Later that afternoon, I found myself in a nearby coffee shop, nervously scrolling through social media when a notification popped up. Helen had posted a status update, feeling overwhelmed but still pushing forward. I believe in my team and our vision. We will overcome this. The optimism in her words struck a chord within me. She was trying to hold on, fighting against the tide that threatened to pull her under. But I knew it was a facade. I watched as the minutes ticked by, my heart pounding in my chest. When my phone buzzed again, I froze. It was a news alert from a local business site, major restructuring at, company name, key players affected. I clicked the link, my breath hitching in my throat. The article detailed the turmoil within Helen's department and named her as one of the individuals facing cuts. Sources indicate that Helen Thompson may be reassigned to a less significant position following a series of project failures, it read. I felt a sinking feeling in my stomach. This wasn't just a setback, it was a complete upheaval of everything she had worked for. I knew the ramifications would be devastating for her career. I had wanted her to feel the sting of betrayal, but I never envisioned it escalating to this extent. Just then, my phone rang. It was Helen. I hesitated, my heart racing as I wondered how to respond. David, can we talk? I need to talk to someone I can trust, she said, her voice shaking. I swallowed hard, unsure if I could handle the weight of the moment. Of course. Where are you? Can you meet me at the park? I just got some news, and I need to process it. I agreed, knowing this would be the hardest conversation yet. As I drove to the park, the reality of the situation loomed over me. Helen was about to confront the consequences of everything I had set in motion. When I arrived, I spotted her sitting on a bench, her hands trembling as she stared at the ground. She looked up when she saw me, her eyes red and puffy. The sight shattered my resolve. David, she whispered, her voice breaking. I just got off the phone with management. They're moving me to a lower position. I can't believe this is happening. The words struck me like a physical blow. I could see the fear and disbelief in her eyes, and it was almost too much to bear. I'm so sorry, Helen. I know how much you've invested in this. Tears welled in her eyes as she fought to hold it together. I didn't think it would come to this. I thought I could turn things around. But now I feel like I'm losing everything. Her pain was raw and palpable, and I struggled to respond, the weight of my actions crashing down on me. This wasn't just a career setback, it was a devastating blow to someone I had once cared for deeply. I wish I could help you, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. I wish I could make this better. Helen looked at me, her eyes searching for answers that I couldn't provide. I thought you would be someone I could lean on. I thought you understood what I was going through. At that moment, I was torn between the darkness of my plans and the remnants of my feelings for her. I had set this in motion, but I was now painfully aware of the consequences. I'm here for you, Helen. Whatever you need, just let me know, I replied, my voice cracking under the weight of my guilt. As she leaned into my shoulder, I felt the tide of emotions rise within me. I had become the architect of her downfall, and now I was left with the burden of what I had created. The thrill of revenge was fading, leaving only the bitter taste of regret in its wake. The park felt eerily quiet as I sat next to Helen, the weight of my guilt pressing down on me like a heavy shroud. She had just received the news that would alter the course of her career, and I felt the gravity of what I had done bearing down on us both. I watched her face contort with emotions, anger, betrayal, fear, and an underlying flicker of disbelief. Helen, I began, my voice shaking, there's something I need to tell you. She turned to me, her expression hardening. What more could you possibly say that would change anything? I just lost my position because of whatever this is. Her voice was thick with hurt, and I could see the walls she was building around herself. No, you don't understand, I pressed, feeling the knot in my stomach tighten. This isn't just about your job. I'm the one who's been behind all of this. The words hung in the air between us, and for a moment, Helen looked at me as if I had just struck her. What do you mean? You? What are you talking about? I've been feeding information to your competitors, trying to undermine you, I admitted, my heart racing as the truth spilled from my lips. I did it out of jealousy, out of anger over what happened between you and Robert. I thought that if I could bring you down, it would somehow make me feel better about everything that happened between us. Her eyes widened in shock, a mix of disbelief and anger boiling beneath the surface. You did what? You sabotaged my career because of your petty jealousy? Yes, I was hurt, Helen. I felt betrayed and angry, I said, desperation creeping into my voice. I thought I could make you understand how it felt, to be left in the dark while you were off playing house with your boss. Helen shook her head, tears spilling down her cheeks. David, I can't believe you would stoop this low. You've ruined my life. You've taken everything from me. I know, I shouted, the guilt surging through me. And I hate myself for it. But I was too caught up in my pain to see the consequences of my actions. I thought it would teach you a lesson, but all I've done is destroy everything we had. I didn't want it to end like this. She stood up abruptly, her body trembling with rage. You think this is about you? Do you think your pain justifies what you've done? I've worked my entire life to get where I am, and you just decided to take it all away because you couldn't handle your feelings? I stood, my heart racing as I tried to find the words to express my remorse. I didn't think it would go this far. I wanted to hurt you, but I never wanted to see you lose everything. I was blinded by my jealousy and rage. Helen's expression shifted from anger to sorrow, the realization of what I had done washing over her. You don't get it, do you? This isn't just a job for me. This was my passion, my purpose. You've taken that away from me. I know, I said, my voice barely a whisper. And I can't take it back. I can't undo the damage I've caused. The silence stretched between us, the weight of my confession hanging heavily in the air. I watched as Helen processed my words, her expression shifting from anger to confusion, then to something more profound, betrayal mingled with a sense of lost hope. I can't believe I ever trusted you, she said, her voice choked with emotion. You were supposed to be someone I could rely on. Someone who cared. I do care, Helen. I always have, but I let my feelings consume me. I let my anger take control, I replied, desperation creeping into my voice. I never meant for it to get this far. For a moment, we stood there, two people caught in the crossfire of their own making. I could see the realization wash over her, the understanding that our lives had irrevocably changed. Maybe this is what I needed, she said finally, her voice low but steady. Maybe it's time for me to start over, without you. I can't stay in a place that no longer feels like home. And I can't have you in my life if you're just going to bring more pain. My heart sank at her words, but I understood. I had pushed her to this point. Helen, I'm so sorry. I never wanted it to end this way. She took a step back, wiping her tears. You have to understand that the consequences of your actions go beyond just me. I'm going to have to rebuild from the ground up. And I can't do that with you hanging over me. Are you going to just walk away? I asked, my voice trembling. I have to, she replied, a mixture of resolve and sadness in her tone. I need to find myself again, to reclaim my life and my career. You have to let me go. With those final words, she turned away from me, her shoulders squared with determination as she walked toward the exit of the park. I stood frozen in place, watching her disappear into the distance. As I stared after her, a wave of sorrow washed over me. I had set off a chain of events that had irrevocably altered both our lives. In seeking revenge, I had lost the very thing I had once cherished most. The realization settled like a heavy weight in my chest. I had wanted to teach Helen a lesson, but instead, I had become a lesson in betrayal, a reminder of how easily love could turn to resentment and pain. As I walked away from the park, I knew I had a long road ahead of me, one filled with the consequences of my actions. Helen would begin anew, and I would be left to grapple with the remnants of what could have been. Haunted by the choices I had made. In the quiet solitude, I began to understand that some wounds run too deep to heal, and some bridges, once burned, can never be rebuilt.